Well, folks, here I am again. If you missed me this morning, you get to take a second shot at me. Of course, I've been doing the classes in the morning, on Sunday morning, for a while. But as far as standing up here and bringing the gospel, it's been a while since I've done that, and so. Again, I appreciate this opportunity to do so. I'm so glad for our visitors, and particularly for Warren and Debbie being here, and I'm going to let you guys know now that yes, I did ask him. I did. Because I knew that's what y'all would want me to do. And I wanted to do it too. I mean, I wanted to hear him, but he kindly declined this time, and nonetheless, like I say, we're so glad that they're able to be here with us and get back down this way. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away, and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. You know, we are living in a time today where man is in search for the pursuit of happiness in this life. This is nothing new, is it? It's something that's been going on for ever since man was created. He's always been in search of happiness and understanding what this life is about. And of course, today, that the answers to that from the world around us, the answers that come from people who are known in the world terms as being wise philosophers and wise educators, wise professors in college. Their understanding of what life is and what the meaning of life is very broad, but it can usually be summed up nowadays in pursuing happiness as pursuing whatever makes you happy, no matter what it does for anyone else, no matter how much hurt that it brings to anybody else. All that counts is what makes you happy, because this is the only life that you're going to live. And after this life is gone, you will no longer have an opportunity to pursue happiness, because there's nothing beyond this life. Something of that variation, but it's not too far, because again, we've definitely seen it, and we've definitely seen what the influence of those type things are in regard to life and how people have pursued it. And as I said a minute ago, that this has always been a question that has been faced, that man has been faced with. And as we see here, that the writer of Ecclesiastes, he too examined this question. And as he summed it up, this life, as viewed from this life, from this side of eternity, everything here is vanity. Everything here simply serves a purpose with regard to this life. Everything that we do here in this life if it's only to serve ourselves is truly vanity, those things. Well, let's talk for a minute about this person, the writer of Ecclesiastes. He was noted for his wisdom that he had when he became a king, as he succeeded his father. And this wisdom was first displayed when he was asked by God, what do you want, basically? What do you want me to give you? And in 1 Kings chapter 3 and verse 9, we see there, he says, "Therefore give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours?" So we see the wisdom in this statement. Here he was, God was giving him the opportunity to have whatever he wanted. And the things that he could have asked for would have been those things that many would have asked for today. To have a longer life, to have power, to be the most powerful person on the earth, to have great riches and things of that nature. But again, he didn't ask for any of those things. Rather, he asked for wisdom. Wisdom in regard to the power that he had, to be able to use that God had given him, to use that wisely. How to use it to control other people's lives in a wise way, in a way that would bring peace and harmony, in a way that would bring glory to God. And so we know as the story continues that God tells him, "Because you've asked this thing and have not asked long life of yourself, nor asked riches for yourself, nor asked for the life of your enemies, but asked for yourself understanding to discern justice, behold, I have done according to your words. See, I have given you a wise and understanding heart, so that there has not been anyone like you before you, nor shall there arise any after you. And I have also given you what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be anyone like you among the kings of all your days. So if you walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments, as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days." And so, as God made this promise to Solomon, that God not only gave him that wisdom that he asked for, but that God blessed him with many other things. That Solomon then moved forward from that, and he used those blessings that he had, and God did truly give him many blessings. For in chapter 4 of 1 Kings, it talks about those many things that he had, material things that he had with regard to his kingdom, and also his power and rule, that he was very, very powerful. And yet still, in spite of those things, we see a focus beginning in verse 29 of chapter 4, that God did give Solomon wisdom and exceedingly great understanding and largeness of heart like the sands of the seashore. Thus Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the men in the east and the wisdom of Egypt. For he was wiser than all men, than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Herman, and Chalcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahal, and his fame was throughout all the surrounding nations. He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. Also he spoke of trees, and from the cedar tree of Lebanon, even to the hyssop that springs out of the wall. He spoke also of animals, of birds, of creeping things, and of fish. And the men of all nations from all kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom came to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And so, again, as we see this, that he had all of these things, and yet the thing that he was noted for, the thing that he was renowned all over the earth for, of other kingdoms and other places, was his wisdom. And it was such that many sought to come to him to gain knowledge from him. And so as Solomon used this wisdom, he worked to gain more wisdom throughout his time. And we see then that at the beginning of this book of Ecclesiastes, that he speaks of his quest in a certain area of wisdom, although he had wisdom in so many areas. He says there in verse 13 of chapter 1, "And I set my heart to seek and search out wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven, this burdensome task God has given to the sons of man by which they may be exercised. For I've seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed all is vanity and grasping for the wind." Also in chapter 2, in verse 22, he says, "For what has man for all of his labor, and for the striving of his heart, with all he has toiled under the sun? For all his days are sorrowful, and his work burdensome. Even in the night he takes no rest. This is also vanity." And so we see what this book is about. Him trying to gain wisdom, to gain understanding, to understand the meaning of life, so that he can use it not just for himself, but that he can share with others. His quest pertains of a greater understanding of what he refers to as life under the sun. He uses this particular phrase 29 times throughout the book of Ecclesiastes, and throughout 27 verses. And so he suggests in this, addressing this life under the sun, is that understanding that comes from what this life, first of all, what this life is about. And he introduces this book with his message, beginning with this, again, with this tone that we read at the beginning, vanity of vanities. That the vanity of life is the major theme that he uses in this book. In fact, he uses this word vanity 35 times throughout 29 verses in the book of Ecclesiastes. And he also searches, basically he's searching for the benefits of man's labor. As he says in chapter 2 and verse 22 there, "For what has man for all of his labor, and for the striving of his heart, for which he has toiled under the sun? For all of his days are sorrowful, and his work burdensome. Even in the night he takes no rest. This is also vanity." So again, his question is what's this all about? Why are we here? What are we working for while we're here? And again, this is the same question that many ask today. And again, as he talks about this, and as he opens up this book and talks about these vanities, the vanity of vanities, that everything is vanity here. Well, to many, it's considered, that's a depressing thing to talk about. You know, here you're a guy that you've got all of these things that you have, you know, all of these great riches and just all of these things, and all that you can talk about is something so depressing as, well, this is just a bunch of useless stuff. And so many think that's what it is. But as we look deeper into the book, we see that he uses other terms. He uses terms like enjoy, joy, enjoyment, rejoice joyfully. And so even though the book addresses vanities being the things of this life and basically what is in this life that exists on this side of the sun, he says that there is joy that we can find in living this life. There are things that we should expect to find as we live here. And so these are the things that we will look at, that these joys, we will look at how to get the most out of life through some of the verses. He actually has a whole lot to talk about, but because of time, we are basically going to hit the tips of the iceberg in so many ways. But let's begin here as he discusses, first of all, before we talk about this joy, he talks about the vanity of life itself. And so he begins from his own experiences. In Ecclesiastes chapter 2, he says, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure. But surely also this was vanity. I said of laughter, madness, and of mirth, what does it accomplish? I searched in my heart how to gratify myself, my flesh with wine, while guiding my heart with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the sons of men to do under the heaven all the days of their life. I made my works great. I built myself houses. I planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchards, and I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees of the grove. And as he even goes on down into verse 10, he says, for whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure. And so we see here as he goes into this, talking about this, he's saying, okay, this is how I've started. This is what I've begun to do, how I've applied this. Apply it the way that everybody does. To just try to go out there and to experience these things, to apply my labors to doing things that are great. And of course we know that Solomon in his time, that's what he did. He built many structures and things like that. And he said, I tried to apply myself in those type things. And with the exception of the building many houses, this may kind of sound familiar to a lot of the average people today. The people that all we want to do is just to work our job, to be able to make enough money to have a house for our family to provide to, and to basically to build around the nest, to do those things, to live life pleasantly with regard to that. And so this is what he says that he did, and felt maybe in a little bit more of a more grander way. And again today, like I say, even people talk about buying things and gaining things, and just trying to find pleasure, to explore pleasure in this life. And so Solomon says, yes, this is what I've done. And again, he says the conclusion of all of those things, that they were all vanity. They were all limited. And then again, talking about his labor, he says in verse again in chapter 2 in verse 10, he says, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my reward from all of my labor. And again, talking about all the things that he did from his labor, that he rejoiced in all of those things. And then he says, and then I looked at all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. So again, we see then that he tried to apply himself in all these things that he did, that he tried to be productive in all of this. And he says, but really when it gets down to the end of it, he says, it's still, these things alone are just vanity. Their use wears out very soon, and there's always a need. The need is never satisfied. And he talks about the vanity in human wisdom. He says, a wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I myself perceive that the same event happens to them all. So I also said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, so it happens to me. And why then was I more wise? And then I said in my heart, this is also vanity. So again, as he began examining this with regard to human wisdom, and that he understood that what applied here actually applied to many other things in regard to this life. He learned that the things that happens to us, again from the perspective of this life alone, that things don't necessarily happen with any rhyme or reason. There's not a recipe of happiness that all can follow. And again, as he points out here particularly, that whatever can happen to a fool can happen to a wise person just as well. And so he said, basically that it doesn't matter whether you're wise or foolish. It doesn't mean that the course of circumstances is going to be necessarily changed in life by which end of the spectrum you're on. That rather, these things happen to everyone. Everyone experiences these types of things. And then he talks about the vanity of all life. Again, in chapter 2 and down in verse 17 there, he says, therefore I hated life because of the work that was done under the sun, and it was distressing for me, for all that is vanity and grasping for the wind. And again, we look at it from just this perspective that he's presenting. Again, from the perspective of just this life and our existence in just this time. And truly, those who today, who live this life without any thought in regard to God, how many have come to hate this life? How many have taken their life simply because they've become tired of seeking one pleasure after another, and then only to conclude that all these pleasures that they've sought, that they all have an expiration date that's very short, and that new experiences that you search for only again last briefly, and then they turn into old experiences. And so many have looked at it from this point of view and have given up and have decided again to take their own lives because they said, their conclusion is this is all that life's about. What's so great about that? The preacher goes on to express observation of other vanities with regard to earthly existence. In chapter 3 and verse 19, he says, for what happens to the sons of men also happens to animals. One thing befalls them as one dies, so dies the other. Surely they all have one breath. Man has no advantage over the animals, for all is vanity. All go to one place, all go all are from the dust and return to dust. Who knows the spirit of the sons of men which goes upward, and the spirit of animal which goes down to the earth? And again, this is certainly just this view is a view that is expressed on many college campuses today across our nation as well as other places. They basically place man in the same category, in the same place as any other animal. That man is just another animal. He's only a little more highly evolved than other animals. But they teach that man has no immortal spirit. There is nothing that sets him apart from any other animals in any other nature. And so for those who pose that proposal, the question has to be asked, if such is true, if man is equal with all the animal kingdom around, again, why is it wrong, or not wrong, in the animal kingdom for an animal to kill an animal? Why isn't there no value being placed there with regard to that? And yet at the same time, why is there inside man's nature, is it wrong for man to kill another man? If we're all animals, if we're all of the same nature. Well, we can see just simply from that point there that's a deep hole that they dig for themselves, because there's not many that really want to accept that it's not wrong for man to take a life of another person. And so man, as it goes on to express here, does not possess the same spirit of animals, of the animal kingdom, nor does his spirit cease to exist at his death, as many would like to believe. Also, the preacher, as he continues on in his examination of others, the vanity of loving abundance, he says in chapter 5 and verse 10, he says, "He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This is also vanity." Again, no matter what the treasure is, man is always seeking for more. His lust to attain is a bottomless pit. The more that he gains, the more he always wants. The man on this side of the sun, and whose life is focused only on this side of the sun, never ceases to thirst for more. Also, the preacher goes on to talk about the vanity of darkness in chapter 11 and verse 8. And he says, "But if a man lives many years and rejoices in them all, yet let him remember the days of darkness, for they will be many. All that is coming is vanity." And so even here he reflects upon that even the man who is blessed with a long life of many years and is able to rejoice in them, yet there's still the knowledge that comes to that man, as comes to everyone, that there is going to be an end with regard to that there comes a time when this life is no more. He also addresses the vanity of childhood and youth. In chapter 11 and verse 10, he speaking of youth there, he says, "Therefore remove sorrow from your heart and put away evil from your flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity." Even in childhood and youth, there is the desire to experience new things. And in particular, there's the temptation to experience those things that are forbidden. And yet he points out here to those who are young that experimenting with those things that are evil will only bring sorrow in the days ahead. And thus he warns of the youth to avoid those things, to turn away from those evils and not engage in them. And also he talks about that childhood itself is also a vanity, that it is a time that will pass away very, very quickly. It will soon be gone. So he then, in his conclusion of these observations with regard to these things of this life, as we've already seen him summed up in our initial reading, he says all is vanity. He says all is vanity and grasping for the wind, there in verse 14 of the first chapter. That, again, his point being that no matter whatever man wants to attain with regard to this life, that he will leave it all behind. In chapter 5 and verse 15, he says, "And he came from his mother's womb, naked shall he return to go as he came, and he shall take nothing from his labor which he may carry in his hand." And of course, as we've always heard the term, that you've never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul trailer. We won't leave this life taking any of these possessions which we've accumulated. So many people have looked at this with regard to the life, and as we have already said, that they've come to the conclusion that that life on this side, that there are many things that are vain, that they're just kind of a spinning of the wheels, and many have fallen into despair and despondency as a result of these things. And yet, as the preacher has presented this side of the vanity of this life, he then turns and says, there are true joys in life. And so, for the remainder of our time, we'll look at those things very briefly. From his own experiences, he says, chapter 2 and verse 10, "For whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my reward from all of my labor." So here we see that his first joy that he talks about is that he did rejoice in his labor, in the things that he applied himself to, that the reward of his labors were to see those things that he was able to accomplish from all of his work. He goes on talking about observations again of others, and very simply, many of these things again connect back to the labors of this life. He talks about that nothing is better than to enjoy the simple things of what you do. In verse 24 of chapter 2, he says, "Nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God. For who can eat, or who can have enjoyment more than I? For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight, but to the sinner he gives the work of gathering and collecting, that he may give him who is good before God." This is also vanity and grasping of the wind. So again, as he talks about this, that there's nothing better than to enjoy these things, the ability to enjoy what you have to do, what you have and what you do, knowing that it comes from God, and giving God the thanks for that. That God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy to those men who are good in His sight. And also, he again talks with regard to those who are wicked, that although they too may accrue many possessions, that those possessions will eventually be lost. And again, they, depending upon those things, what will they have after that, after they have lost all of their possessions? He goes on talking about that in the day of prosperity to rejoice, and in the day of adversity to contemplate. He says, in the day of prosperity be joyful, but in the day of adversity consider. Surely God has appointed one as well as the other, so that man can find out nothing that will come after him. So again, we all experience different things in our lives. Not all of us enjoy great prosperity. Some are blessed with more prosperity than others, and likewise, there are times when we're not blessed. There are those that are not blessed with as many good things as we do have. So we truly are always living prosperous lives as we have here. God has blessed us in so many ways, and so we should enjoy that prosperity. We should rejoice in the things that God has given to us, and likewise, prosperity doesn't always come, but adversity comes as well. And so he tells us there that we should, in those times, in the bad times as well as good, that we should rejoice, and that we should meditate upon those things that we have, but above all, that we should never forget God. And so thus he commends the simple enjoyment of the fruit of one's labor as the gift from God to him. And again, in chapter 8 and verse 15, he says, "So I commended enjoyment, because the man has nothing better under the sun than to eat, drink, and be merry. For this will remain in him, and the labor all the days of his life, in which God gives him under the sun." And so very simply, again, he says here to enjoy these things which we have. So his conclusion of these things, again, he says to enjoy the fruits of your labor in chapter 9 and verse 7. "Go eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already accepted your works. Let your garments be always be white, and let your head lack no oil. Live joyfully with the wife of whom you love all the days of your vain life, which he has given you under the sun, all of your days of vanity. For that is your portion in life, and that is the labor in which you perform under the sun." So he tells us to as we go in this life, to enjoy it. That we should not be guilty of the things that we have in this life. Again, we're going through some strange times, and people are out there are often telling us that we should be guilty of the things that we have, that we should feel guilt for these things. No, we should feel blessed of all the prosperity that God has blessed us with in these things. And again, he gives this description. Let others to see your joy in living your life for him, for living your life for God. As he says in verse 8 there, "Let your garments always be white, and let your head lack no oil." Let others see that God has blessed you and what you want to do in return for him. And he says again to live joyfully with the wife that you love and with whom that you have been blessed. That's what we are to do here. God has provided us with these things. He's blessed us with these possessions, with our wife, our family, and again, we are encouraged to enjoy these things. He says that's the portion of your life and the labor from which you have performed under the sun. And so this is what God has intended us to do while we're living here. To the young, he says, encourages them to enjoy their youth. In chapter 11 and verse 9, he says, "Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes. But know that all these things, for all these things, God will bring you into judgment." And so then, as we read earlier, he continues his admonition to the young, saying, "Therefore remove sorrow from your heart, and put away all evil from your flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity." So again, to the young, the admonition to enjoy your youth. Enjoy that time when you are vital and you're able to enjoy so many things of this life. But at the same time, basically keep your head upon yourselves, and remember that even in youth, that if we choose to pursue evil things, that there will be an accountability for us in those type of things. Again, in chapter 12 and verse 1, that he admonishes the young, "Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth." And again, we have our young that are going out to college campuses and other places, and in a society where the last thing that they want them to do is to remember their Creator. God tells us that's what we are to be doing, to remember Him in the days of our youth. And then finally, he talks about the ultimate meaning of life under the sun. In chapter 12 and verse 13, and he says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good and evil. And so this is the conclusion of his whole book then. This is what life is all about, as he says. He says it's about remembering who's in control. That God is in control of all of these things. This God who blesses you with all that you have. That He blesses you with this job that you have to labor and to do these things. This God who blesses you with this family that you have and all the other blessings that you benefit from as a result of that. To fear God and to keep His commandments. And so, what does this mean then to us today as far as fearing God and keeping His commandments? The Apostle Paul made this observation in Acts chapter 17 and verse 24. He said, "God, who made the world and everything in it, since He is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is He worshipped with men's hands as though He needed anything, since He gives to all life, breath, and all things. And He has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings, so that they should seek the Lord, in hope that they might grope for Him and find Him, though He is not far from each one of us. For in Him we live and move and have our being, as also some of your own poets have said, for we are His offspring. Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone or something shaped by art and man's devising. Truly, these times of ignorance God overlooked, but now commands all men everywhere to repent, because He has appointed a day on which He will judge the world in righteousness by the man whom He has ordained. He has given much assurance of this to all by raising Him from the dead. So, The conclusion then of the matter is that we're to fear God and to keep His commandments. And His command is that all men everywhere should repent. That's the starting point. How about you? Is that something that you've done? Have you repented? Have you begun that change in your life? If not, we would encourage you to make that step forward now, before another day passes and perhaps the last day passes. Do this now while you have the opportunity. We ask you to come as we stand and sing.